what you're seeing is the Ethereum ecosystem struggle with scale and growing into its final form at a time in which alternative layer ones and specifically I think Solana is getting a bid. With Solana, it feels like they're trying to be decentralized Nasdaq or Nasdaq on chain, and I think that Ethereum is competing on a couple different fronts. And because it's got this modular sort of like sprawling ecosystem, it's just a little bit harder of a story to tell.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Coinage. I'm your host, Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City as we are wrapping up a wild week as Trump steps into office. And similarly, as there are changes here in the United States, there are changes afoot at the Ethereum Foundation and in the Ethereum community. And no one better, I think, to come on and talk about it today, back on Coinage with us, than Kevin Owocki, the founder at Gitcoin and author of the new book, How to DAO. Kevin, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for coming back on.
Hey, Zach, what's good? Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. I'm glad we got you on today. A lot of people in our community, obviously, as a DAO, excited to have this conversation and chat with you about kind of your take on things. I know you've been pretty active about what Ethereum can do to better itself and some of the changes that can be made to help in what we're trying to do here in 2025. I just kind of want to start, and obviously congratulations on the book, How to DAO, Mastering the Future of Internet Coordination. I believe we have a nice little cover shot to show for people to get excited about what you put out there, and looking forward to digging into the specifics. But Kevin, just kind of want to get your take, you know, not just as a founder in the crypto space, but as someone who's definitely played an influential role in Ethereum, kind of what you're making of where we're at right now.
Yeah, well, Ethereum is my home. Gitcoin was built in the Ethereum space, and I'm super thankful to Vitalik and to the Ethereum Foundation and the entire Ethereum community for giving Gitcoin a place where it can grow and fund what matters in the 21st century to the Ethereum ecosystem. But I hope that we're going to export some of the good that we're doing to the rest of the world at some point. I think that Ethereum is in a place where it's hitting the hard problems first because it's the biggest, largest ecosystem out there. And, what you're seeing is the Ethereum ecosystem struggle with scale and growing into its final form at a time in which alternative layer ones and specifically I think Solana is getting a bid. And I think that what you're seeing is people who are dissatisfied with the price. Sol ETH is certainly down, that are sort of starting to revolt because Ethereum isn't, in their opinion, scaling fast enough or moving more decisively against so I think that you're sort of seeing dissatisfaction with number not going up fast enough. But in many ways, Ethereum, I think, is staying the course on what's been working, the layer 2 roadmap, and having an emphasis on plurality and on scalability. And so I think that we're sort of navigating the trade-offs associated with Ethereum's design, the modular blockchain thesis versus the monolithic blockchain thesis. We're starting to see that play out right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's been interesting. Obviously, there has been, just looking at the Sol ETH chart there in terms of kind of up and to the right as Solana's enjoyed. Again, it's been interesting to see some of the enthusiasm for Solana and some of the shifts that have taken place this week. One of them, obviously, kind of being this idea of maybe misunderstanding in the I don't know, what has been the theme for, I think, maybe the last year or so in terms of institutional interest. I kind of want to get your take because it does seem kind of like there's a difference between builders in the crypto space and kind of having the ethos of decentralization and that idea versus, hey, number go up, as you kind of alluded to. I just kind of want to play a clip. We had Cosmo Zhang, who's a Coinage DAO member as well, on the show a little bit ago, kind of talking about that dichotomy in terms of where institutional interest is now after you have President Trump launching his own meme coins on Solana. Just want to play a clip of kind of what we heard from him and kind of the thinking at Pantera as they talk to a lot of institutional investors. Take a listen to what he told us.
But if you look at something like a Solana, man, when we talk to the allocators that we talk to, whether it's any of the large bank wirehouses, without naming names, but there's only so many, um, it's very clear that like when we talk to them, they talk about how 95% of the conversations are about Bitcoin, but the next most talked about token is Solana, and ETH is a very distant third amongst
Hmm.
TradFi people who don't own crypto, right? And so like that just speaks to like people are aware of what stuff is working, where the growth is, and people just want to buy assets that represent tokens that represent protocols that are growing and doing very well.
And so, Kevin, I mean, like, it seems like one of the main pushes that came out of this week was really the idea of helping institutional investors understand kind of what's going on with Ethereum now and how it may be, a place to do everything that Solana's doing right now. But what do you kind of make, I think, of the messaging changes that are afoot?
I think what Ethereum's trying to do is pretty big, and the modular blockchain thesis means that when we talk about Ethereum, we need to identify whether we're talking about the Ethereum mainnet or are we talking about Ethereum and all of the layer twos and all of the DeFi protocols and projects that are built upon it. I kind of take a broader view of Ethereum, where I think Ethereum equals the mainnet, but also all of the layer twos that are built on top of that. And if you look at all of the metrics, the Ethereum mainnet and all of its layer twos number is going up in terms of block space used and number of transactions and economic activity that's happening there. And I think the issue is that it's just a more complicated story to tell than Bitcoin's trying to be digital gold. It seems like that's the narrative that's taken off in Bitcoin, and with Solana, it feels like they're trying to be decentralized Nasdaq, or Nasdaq on chain. And I think that Ethereum is competing on a couple different fronts. And because it's got this modular sort of like sprawling ecosystem, it's a little bit harder of a story to tell. I think if you're looking for like a snappy soundbite narrative, and in an attention economy, something that's like a shorter narrative and is more concise is definitely gonna take a lot more heat. So I definitely think that there's merit and heat and traction and network effects in the Ethereum ecosystem, but it maybe what you're seeing in that clip is that it's not translating to the clients that he's talking to there. But if you look at the Ethereum ETF inflows, I think that they have been pretty strong, and so it's interesting to note that there are people out there that are seeing the value in the future of Ethereum, and you can just see that in the Ethereum net inflow chart to the ETF. And I also think it's notable that Trump's World Liberty Financial is buying ETH with the money that it's making. So there's
Yes.
at least one person who's a little bit more trad that believes in Ethereum and its narrative. So I'll be curious to see how
Yeah.
it all shakes out.
Yeah, no, it is a good point. I mean, I think that is a worthwhile thing to point out there in World Liberty Financial and what's being done there. All the ETH names, I was looking at them. There's some funny ETH names in there. If you go through the token sale and look at who is throwing money into the project, including some colorful ones. Shout out to AskLover.eth, whoever has that one, because it's there and it's fun to kind of go through those names. But Kevin, you did have a thread. I do want to give you a shout out for this article you wrote. It was flagged again, and again, we're coming at this. We have a lot of ETH fans in the Coinage community as a DAO with NFTs that are built on Ethereum mainnet. As we navigate all this, it's been as a founder here, it is fascinating to see all this play out when you're considering costs, support. We can get into it in a second when it comes to Anatoly's been on the show like 3 or 4 times, I think. Still waiting to see when Vitalik might swing by, but I want to talk about your article, how you think some of this might be on people who are in the ETH community as well. And I think I would put Coinage in that camp, just kind of given what I just said. But you wrote this: the wartime leader we need is you, 8 ways to make Ethereum win. And I want to dig into kind of what you think is necessary as the Ethereum Foundation and everyone kind of in this community wakes up. We're kind of looking ahead to ETH Denver. But you highlighted a few things that I think might be worth digging into here. What prompted you to kind of want to write this? And what do you think necessarily in terms of like ETH fans themselves needs to change?
Yeah, well, it's funny to be talking about this with you now because this I wrote this article on last Saturday, and I just sort of rage wrote it because I saw a bunch of stuff going on in the Ethereum ecosystem, and I wanted to sort of put my voice out there that the reason the header says the wartime leader we need is you, and there's a big emoji pointing at the reader is that I at that time that I was seeing a lot of calls for Danny Ryan to come back and to become the executive director of the Ethereum Foundation. And I've got a nuanced perspective here. Danny and I know each other. We both live in Colorado. And are friends. And the thing that I want to say is, like, Danny is a great leader, but he's not a panacea. This is a decentralized ecosystem. And what we really need is for everyone in the ecosystem to step up and to provide their talents and to work earnestly to make Ethereum successful. And Danny Ryan is great. I hope he comes back to the Ethereum ecosystem, but he's not a panacea. I think that it's important that we all step up and that we make Ethereum scale and be interoperable with itself and align on a narrative for Ethereum that's as simple as Bitcoin is digital gold, Ethereum is ultrasound money. I think is the most recent narrative that we had that was really pithy. But I think that, like, the reason I wrote this article is that I just want people to know that Danny Ryan is a great leader, but he's not a panacea, and there's other things that we could be doing in order to make Ethereum more successful than it is right now. So happy to go through some of the points in the article. I'm curious if there's any threads you want to pull.
Yeah, there are. I mean, I'll scroll to this part here because you did mention, ultrasound money and the idea of going up against the Nasdaq or decentralized Nasdaq, and kind of, whenever we talk to Solana founders, and we just had a few of them on in our crypto project of the year, which are again, our community has a lot of ETH people in it because they've minted NFTs on Ethereum mainnet, and still, Solana was named by our community's project of the year. And again, I'm not saying it's either or. I think it's been very fun to kind of watch this back and forth between Jesse Pollock as he builds out base and a lot of the Solana builders, because it's not necessarily a winner take all. And you kind of point that out in your thread, that it's a little bit of an Apple versus Android moment here. And there are things that can be done to help ETH really get that across the board in terms of the messaging. But I do think that is one of them, because you kind of say that, this project, the space, can lean into the things that make it what Solana is not, which is leaning into, I think, DAOs as they exist, which is maybe a good segue into the book, and kind of why I would agree with you there, because, as again, a Web3 outlet co-owned by our NFT holders, I think that that's what we're here for. But how do you think that Ethereum in this pivot can actually lean into doing that to really support the DAOs, to support the builders who are trying to also build projects that are aligned with the Ethereum ethos? Because from where I sit, it does seem like it's a huge problem that needs to be fixed. And I assume that's also why you started Gitcoin. Last time we talked, that's why you kind of launched Gitcoin. So you would know.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're doing in the Web3 space is increasing the pace at which people can coordinate. And I'm really excited about what makes Ethereum unique. We have a culture of public goods funding. We have a culture of NFTs. The largest network effects of DeFi remain in the Ethereum ecosystem. And so, I would push back a little bit on the framing of there being a pivot in the Ethereum ecosystem. I think that Vitalik has really strongly messaged that we're staying the course on layer 2 scaling and the modular blockchain thesis. And we're not going to go to just pumping up the gas and becoming another alt layer 1 that's going to centralize the validation layer in order to scale the network. That's just not who we are in the Ethereum ecosystem. And maybe that means giving up a little bit of market share in the short term. But I think that medium and long term, Ethereum is going to grow and scale, and it's going to be really, really successful. So what I'm really excited about is the DAO ecosystem, is the crypto ecosystem starting to really coordinate on what makes Ethereum unique, and converging on a narrative and on a way of abstracting away all the fragmentation that's happened over the last couple of years, and just making Ethereum a really great developer experience. And I think that's how we're going to win over the next million developers and billion users. So, I think that we'll see how things shake out in the next cycle, but I think that Ethereum is really positioned for strong growth, and I can't wait to see what happens over the next cycle.
Just to follow up there, though, I mean, if you want to push back on the idea of there being a pivot, which parts would you push back on? Because I assume that a lot of the messaging now is that's kind of what they want to have come out. I mean, if you listen to Joe Lubin now, it seems like there's a call, like a mandate. Everyone likes using that word now since post-election, but it seems like there's a mandate among the Ethereum builders to say, hey, Joe, get more active. I mean, if you look at kind of the headlines now that have kind of been played around, from Joe Lubin himself, it does seem like that is kind of his call to action here, is that he's coming back in, and that they will play a more heavier hand in helping, some of that messaging. But which part do you think isn't necessarily coming across the pivot, or shouldn't?
I think that we're staying the course on the modular blockchain thesis and doubling down on layer twos, just making them much easier to develop on and to build on. And so in that sense, I think the Ethereum ecosystem is staying the course. Now, where I think that there is and could be a pivot is at the social layer. So I think that one of the things that we really need to stop doing is stop thinking that users of blockchain apps are going to care about what has the most pristine, most decentralized block space. It was true when Ethereum started that people really cared about decentralization and had those values. But as blockchains go more mainstream, we can't count on people actually caring about the difference between the types of block space that they're consuming. And so I think that what you're going to see is a pivot at the social layer from those types of values, from like crypto anarchist libertarian types values, to what works in the mainstream and what actually provides utility to users. And so where I do think there's going to be a pivot is at the application layer, or what I'm starting to call the adoption layer, as we start to really build skills around what is going to get people to adopt blockchain apps. It's not going to be an ideological rigor around decentralization. It's going to be utility maximalization. So the path I see forward for Ethereum, and maybe that you see in the article that you just showed about Joe Lubin, is really stepping up at the application and the adoption layer and building world-class applications that help people do things that they could never do before, powered by Ethereum. I think using stablecoins, consuming stablecoins is a great example of something that really helps you legitimately if you're in a country that has an inflationary traditional economic ecosystem. That's an example of like actual adoption. I'm really excited about DeFi starting to worm its way more in traditional finance. I'm really excited about public goods funding tools like Gitcoin starting to run actual on the ground infrastructure funding of what's good in local communities across the world. I think you're going to see that over the next couple of years. So I think that TLDR, the answer to your question, is staying the course at the protocol layer, but at the adoption and app layer and the cultural layer, maybe we'll start to see some pivots over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think everyone's kind of on the same camp who's seen, hey, look, the shift in the roadmap brought on some threats, right, in terms of losing steam, because you have this fragmentation when you build out the layer twos, and the idea of, okay, if you're gonna make things cheaper, fees go down. Some of that momentum to an institutional investor, like what they like seeing is steady growth, and then when you change kind of the strategy, some of that growth doesn't look so steady on paper anymore, but everyone in the space understands what's going on, and it's very tricky to kind of tell that story. So like, I'm not surprised this is happening, but I think, I do believe what you're saying, what Jesse's saying, what other people in the Ethereum space are saying about long-term roadmap still intact. This is just kind of what happens. But you're making it easier to build, and so more builders will come in. But I do want to shift the idea to, I think, again, something that you highlighted in your piece there, and no doubt also in the book, which is attracting, I think, communities like ours that are trying to build something that is real and Web3. And I think now we can talk about DAOs, because I think that that's kind of where I see the biggest opportunity in what ETH is trying to do, and maybe from a branding perspective, perhaps what you allude to as well in this Solana versus Ethereum debate is that, a lot of people are saying Solana's building more short-term things. If you listen to Jesse, that's his main point, is that there's meme coinery over there, and on the ETH side, there's DAOs that are trying to build longer-term things. And, I'm not saying whether or not that's right, but from the book, Kevin, when you kind of build how to DAO, why you wrote that book, is that somewhat of the piece that you're trying to kind of get out there?
Yeah, it's funny because we started at the top of this episode talking about how it's really hard to write anything in the crypto space that has staying power because the space moves so fast. And one of the challenges with writing this new book, How to DAO, which just came out this week, is that what we really wanted to focus on is writing about the timeless things that are going to be enabled by blockchains. And, obviously with a traditional publisher, we actually are publishing this book with Penguin Random House, which I'm super thankful for helping them bring this story to the mainstream. We're going to have a book about DAOs in Barnes and Nobles and other retail bookstores, and I'm really excited about that. Is finding the timeless things about crypto that are really going to change the world, and not attaching to any specific one narrative that's only going to last for weeks or months. And, I think that DAOs are going to be our vehicle for internet era coordination. For the first time ever, I can share assets with someone from across the world that I've never met, and I don't have to worry about about sharing that assets with someone all the way across the world. And I think that that's a really powerful technology, our ability to coordinate with people across the world and to build network social movements. I really think that we're building the foundation for how collective action is going to be done in the internet age. And so that's what we were trying to capture in the book, How to DAO. And, I think there's going to be trends that are going to be built on top of that work into that thesis. You talked about meme coins at the start, and I actually think meme coins have had a lot more staying power than people had thought they were. I mean, like Dogecoin in some ways in crypto is almost like a blue chip at this point. And I think it's interesting to see how things are going to change and how weird and wacky we're going to get in the 21st century. But there's one thing that I do know, and that's that DAOs are here to stay, and we're going to be using them to coordinate in the 21st century around some of the most important social causes that we have out there, and also silly memes like Dogecoin. And so that's kind of what's exciting about unveiling that frontier and communicating it to mainstream people who are starting to enter the space.
Yeah, look, I mean, again, we started Coinage because I think there are a lot of cool DAOs out there, and the idea of DAOs are really cool. And, Coinage being the first one that's trying to build as a cooperative Web3 DAO, same kind of structure that Ethereum Denver has, same legal team, by the way, in what they're trying to do with Spork, and what we're trying to do in terms of being the first NFT project that can pay patronage dividends back to NFT holders, is a real way of saying, look, mint an NFT, co-own Coinage in a way that other projects can't. And I guess, Kevin, I would push back, because as much as I love the idea of meme coins, if there is no real rational kind of like connection to, hey, real co-ownership in this thing, it is kind of just speculation. And that is kind of the piece where I feel like DAOs in their mission for real ideas, even as silly as Constitution DAO was, by the way, it was really trying to do co-ownership over that replica constitution in a way that, maybe it wasn't fully fleshed out or answered in terms of, hey, what does real co-ownership look like? Am I just voting on like where this constitution is going to be displayed versus will I get upside revenue? And I think that that's about to change, hopefully, under the Trump administration. But for projects who have tried to do the homework and get it done, like us, it's already existed if you really wanted to do it that way. And so I feel like, is there an example that you'd point to? I know we were just saying that it's super hard to have examples, but what are the DAOs that you kind of champion? I know you've made a few mention in the book, but which ones are your favorite go-tos now to be like, this is the right way to do it?
Yeah. Well, one of the DAOs that I think has done an incredible job of having staying power is MakerDAO. They've built a decentralized stablecoin, DAI, and that one DAI has been equal to $1 basically since they launched that product in 2018. And I think that's an incredible testament to a well-designed DAO working on one of the most important things out there, which is exporting US dollars to the world and giving people a stable unit of account, and the ability for people to have stable purchasing power in an inflationary ecosystem, I think is really incredible, especially if you look at the adoption in places like Venezuela. So that's one of my my favorite examples of DAOs. But there's countless other ones out there. I think Constitution DAO we talked about was a really bold experiment in shared ownership of something like the Constitution. I also think that I'm really excited about ENS. They're basically selling property rights to the naming system of the new Ethereum-based internet, and they're doing it in a completely decentralized way. I think that that's super cool. But I think that one of the things that we could push the edge of in this conversation is looking at what value actually is in the 21st century. You mentioned that what ETH Denver is doing and what Coinage is doing around sharing dividends and upside with your audience is sort of an experiment in 21st century ownership. And one of the things that I look at when I look at the old world versus the new world is how the financial models of a lot of these things are just completely changing. In the old world, we valued things off of the PDE ratio of how much the price per earnings ratio is on a stock. And I think the new world is an attention economy, in which we are now starting to see assets that are valued by how much attention they can draw. And so I think
Yes.
that in some ways we're kind of moving from the old world, in which things are financialized and based off of like how much they're going to return in the future, to an attention economy native valuation of these things. And that's why you're starting to
Yes.
see more of meme coin type valuation models in the
Yes.
crypto space.
I would agree with all of that. I would agree with all of that. And I don't hate on meme coins, but I do think that when you compare the two, that's where it gets very interesting. Because like my theory is all, and it's not groundbreaking, but I think anyone who understands this stuff would say the same thing: is that kind of Web3 is the merge of attention and money on the internet in this new era. And you can have users attention, or you can have money, and you can make money both ways in Web3. And meme coins are capitalizing on the attention piece of that. And I think what's about to happen, and we can get into this too, Kevin, with staking and kind of that whole thing with the ETFs, having a bunch of money, and then you all of a sudden allow staking in those ETFs. A lot of people are going to make money for having money as well. But for what we're doing here at Coinage, it's everything you just kind of displayed and laid out there, is that you can do both. And so for us, as a media outlet that lets people co-own us by minting an NFT to open up a path to patronage dividends, we've realigned incentives to do exactly that, which I think has been fun. And we're going to be putting out a statement on the state of Coinage next week to highlight A, what those dividends are going to look like, and B, kind of how we've started to scale this thing. Because you mentioned once you have a network of invested viewers who are in this with you, we've now got staking validators as well. We're running those through our partners at Dike. We've got 40 chains that we're operating on, and our viewers can stake with us. And those rewards go back into the DAO. It's become a very fun flywheel effect for us to build with our viewers and let them in on this. But I think that that's what Web3 is all about. And I think that that's how DAOs win in the long run. And my last pitch, Kevin, would be A, would love to have you in the community, but B, I think that that's where Ethereum has a leg up on what they should be doing next, because to your point, anyone can kind of capitalize on attention, but very few projects think about how you scale that attention in the long run. Ethereum's been able to do that. So from where I sit as a branding perspective, leaning into projects that are trying to do that as well in the Ethereum ecosystem, a la Coinage, would make a lot of sense. But I'm just kind of curious if there are other examples that you've seen kind of applying that to other spaces, because we're trying to do it in media. But as you said, there's a bunch of different projects and founders. And how do you kind of align that with the Ethereum Foundation to support those people?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's just incredible that you guys are building this flywheel where viewers actually have participation in the network. And, it's one of those things where you look at a Web2 network, something like Uber and Airbnb, and it's kind of mind blowing to me that the drivers of Uber and the hosts of Airbnb don't own a piece of the platform that is providing them with their revenue. It just feels like a more solid design to have that set
Well, I
up. And
guess
so
I would say, yeah, they tried to do that. If you remember in the IPO, they're like, same thing with Airbnb, I think too. They're like, hey, after we've now made all this money and accrued all this value, we're going to give you shares in the IPO at the price that like bankers can get on, which to your point is very different than when we're on the ground. Can you get in on the ground floor price as we scale this thing together, which I think is something worth flagging all the time, because those projects try and pull that and it's not the same.
Yeah, if you bootstrap the network effects of a platform, I think that you should have upside in it. And I think that the barriers that those platforms ran into were, one part, not having a financial system that has normalized that and has primitives to do that. But it's also, there's a regulatory burden there that I think that they ran into. And so I'm really excited about people who are pushing the edge of how do we do this in the 21st century. And by the way, cooperatives where the employees and the customers are members and actually stockholders of a business, that's not a new model. We used to call that co-ops back in the day.
Exactly.
And now I think that what we're starting to see is what my friend Nathan Schneider calls platform cooperatives, where basically we can actually have cooperatives in the internet age where customers and employees can participate in the upside alongside the financial class of what has been created. And it just feels like a more stable equilibrium for how to build a business in the 21st century, is to give people upside in those businesses. So I'm super bullish on DAOs as digital co-ops and digital networks that have the right incentives for everyone to help them grow. And I think that that confers an evolutionary advantage to people who are starting a new ventures and do it as a DAO. So super bullish on DAOs over here.
Well, I'm just hoping that in the next iteration of this book, Coinage might get a shout out because, yes, we are a cooperative based in Colorado as well. It's a Colorado co op. And so, I don't know, it just clicked for us in terms of that is the right way, I think, to build in the 21st century. And it has been cool because a lot of co op people have reached out to us and been like, hey, did you just put a co op on the blockchain? And it's like, yeah. And also allowing all this stuff to happen makes co-ops run more efficiently because you can do it all on the blockchain and track who's active and who's inactive, depending on how you want to set it. It's been very fun, I got to say. And so if you're a co-op listening to this, please hit us up because we want to do more of these. But Kevin, the last thing, as I alluded to, is kind of around how you see things changing for the rest of this year. Because obviously, I think you know a lot more about what's going on in terms of having these conversations with people who are more, I guess, invested in the Ethereum space, and looking ahead to how you see some of those early changes now being applied. What are you most excited about in terms of how some of these problems get solved by the community?
The thing that makes me the most bullish on Ethereum is just all of the talented people that are working to do things as diverse as DeFi, the future of art collecting, the future of AI agents, the future of DAOs, the future of public goods funding. It's all happening in the Ethereum ecosystem. And, I think that the EVM has an amazing network effect for developers that want to build on top of it. If you search EVM or Solidity on GitHub, you just see a wealth of IP that you can leverage, and all of it is open source. And I don't think there's other blockchain ecosystems that can claim that. And just to illustrate why this is so powerful, I, as a software engineer, can walk into a hackathon and I could build something in a weekend with a couple of friends that would have taken a bank $10 million and 100 or 1,000 people to do 10 years ago. And that's because of the accumulated IP that we've got in the open source ecosystem built on top of the EVM. There's primitives for tokens, for public goods funding, for automated market makers, for AI agents that are all open source, and I can pull those off the shelf and not have to build them myself. So the pace of innovation is going to continue to grow exponentially in the Ethereum ecosystem. And for me, that's why it's the place to be building. Because you can do so much more, better, faster, cheaper with open source software and the cumulative IP that we've got than you ever could before. We are standing on the shoulders of giants in the Ethereum ecosystem. So I think the future is bright, and I am going to keep building on top of the EVM.
Yeah, just to share, I guess, kind of, putting all that together with some of the other points that we talked about, it does seem like Ethereum does have a leg up when we talk about this ETF and why it matters now from a capital flows perspective, right? Because I think that that's definitely worth highlighting, getting your take on kind of how this changes now as Trump takes office. And one of the changes I think is coming very quick. And I think people are sleeping on it personally in the Ethereum ecosystem because maybe they don't understand the capital markets flows. Maybe they don't really quite get why this gives them a huge advantage now, but I do want to highlight it and get your take on it because when you kind of look at one of the things that Hester Peirce highlighted on a Coinage interview back in July, she was saying that, look, Gary Gensler wouldn't allow us to do this because he was in charge. We couldn't allow the ETFs that, as you pointed out, have really started to accelerate in terms of attracting flows recently. We couldn't allow them to stake their ETH, but that may soon change. And basically told us on her interview in December that, look, this is going to happen faster than people think. We're going to reconsider it. Yesterday, she took down SOB 121, basically curb stomped Gary Gensler in public with SOB 122 and saying that, hey, we're throwing that rule out. And so I think it looks like the floodgates are about to open here, and Solana doesn't have an ETF, though there might be interest. Ethereum does, and the opportunity there for staking certainly is a benefit rather than negative. So, I mean, I guess, how do you see capitalizing on the lead Ethereum has? It seems like that runway is there. From a capital markets perspective, but could potentially shrink if a Solana one gets approved. I mean, how important is that to you?
Well, I think on your first point about regulatory clarity and the changes going on in Washington, I actually went to DC with Coinbase. They have this initiative called Stand with Crypto, in which they port founders out that are doing good work to DC. And I met a couple congressmen. And, what I learned from that trip was that there's a generational divide in Washington. The boomers don't like crypto. It feels like it's all a scam to them. And the younger congressmen see the upside in crypto for creating financial inclusion and for creating a better financial system. And so there's a generational divide in Washington. And just because of the entropy of the universe and time moving forward, we are going to see more young people in Congress replacing the boomers that are over there. And I think that the future of crypto in Washington is going to get increasingly better for people who are doing right by the spirit and the letter of the law. So I'm really excited about the generational change that we're seeing in Washington and more regulatory clarity for the crypto ecosystem. With respect to the ETF, I think that we're going to continue to see flows in Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. If more ETFs are approved for other crypto assets, then I think that we're going to see more money flowing into them. And I think that my framing is that it's crypto versus TradFi, not one crypto asset versus another. I think that there's a lot of upside for all of the different crypto assets that are doing good work in the ecosystem. And, Ethereum is going to be one of those. I think Ethereum's got exponential innovation. And I think that it's going to be very successful in the future. And there's going to be other assets that are successful as well.
I think that is an interesting way to kind of wrap this convo up, because pitting it as a congressional thing and I don't know. I saw Vitalik's post. I don't know if you saw it too, when he was talking about politicians launching coins, and maybe potentially the attack vector that could open up when it comes to bribery. President Trump just retweeted one of my threads on his Memecoin launch, but the more I look at it, I actually think World Liberty Financial looks more intriguing. And this is essentially what Vitalik had laid out, is that, it opens up the ability for a president to potentially be bribed through some other entity. And that might not be good. If you think about America, Kevin, if I would turn it back to you, you could consider America a DAO in the idea of, its democratization of a government, and you can vote on it. And that's kind of America's DAO. And the currency is the dollar. And the idea of potentially a politician coming in here and, trying to leverage crypto that way. It was very interesting to read Vitalik's thoughts. And I wonder if there is potentially something there in terms of, if you're defending DAOs in this new book and the idea of DAOs, if there are concerns you might have when it comes to that too, and maybe potentially what something like a politician launching coins and having something that could potentially conflict interests of the DAO he has been elected to run could present. I don't know if you've thought about it that way too.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of interesting questions in there, but the first thing I'll call out is that I feel like you're kind of like burying the lead a little bit there. We call the United States of America a DAO. Holy crap. Let's talk about that for a second. So the separation of powers, this is actually a point that my friend Glenn Weil made to me a little while ago, is that the separation of powers in the United States Constitution between the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch is decentralization, democratization. This is kind of like one of the ideas behind liberal democracy, is that we should separate powers and not give anyone God power over the system, because absolute power is absolutely corrupted. And so I think that, DAOs are a continuation of this idea of decentralization of power and are a way to have us have more digital democracy. And I think there's something profound there of that tradition of sharing power and decentralizing power, that yes, now we're bringing it on chain, and now we have autonomous organizations. Autonomous means that the smart contracts are enforcing the code. And, the United States doesn't have autonomous code. We have a whole judicial branch that's meant to enforce the law. And so, my only pushback on America being a DAO is that I don't think that the law is enforced autonomously. That kind of highlights one of the benefits of crypto, is that you have smart contracts that, instead of having to pay lawyers thousands of dollars per hour and to go to court in order to settle disputes, they can just be settled instantaneously because of the property of smart contracts. So I think there's something cool about DAOs just being a continuation of liberalism and democracy that is really beautiful there. So I'll pause there, and if you want to react to that, we can, and then we can get into the conflict of interest with the Trump meme coin that Vitalik called out, if that's interesting to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it is. I think, when we talk about why it's interesting, it's just, again, you're right to point out that so many people have talked about the meme coins, but fewer people have talked about World Liberty Financial and kind of what that is and what it looks like. And, again, seeing the president retweet our thread was pretty interesting. But I do think, we've never had to deal with this because, the idea of a president launching a meme coin is not something that James Madison or any one of the founding fathers really, I think, ever had to discuss, right? It's not something that came up. But the idea of maybe launching, a DeFi platform and what President Trump could be doing with that project, the reason why I retweeted the thread, it was me talking about potentially what he's planning on doing when he has everyone in the crypto industry come down to DC, launches a meme coin. Well, no one's expecting it, and then now also has this other project that a bunch of projects are trying to get World Liberty to buy. We've seen Justin Sun doing that with Tron. There's just a lot of questions. And, without getting into the politics side of it, I just think there's a lot of big questions that are asked when it comes to, do you want to open that box? And Vitalik coming out and essentially saying, it's better you don't, I think is important for people, at least in America, to talk about. And maybe, again, these are not questions if you're a profit-seeking entity, a la Coinbase. You're going to ask because you have no choice. If Kraken's going to list that coin, then you got to do it too. And so it just presents a lot of, I think, maybe potentially, Kevin, you could say the same thing, a race to the bottom in some of this stuff if there aren't appropriate checks and balances. And unfortunately, I don't think that's possible in crypto.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that at the social layer, there are definitely best practices that we can kind of develop, and to the extent that we all agree on them, then they can be enforced socially. And I think, as you noted, the president launching a meme coin is definitely our uncharted territory. And I think that we're going to see the development of those social norms in real time over the next couple of years. And to your point, maybe this is a primitive that all politicians and celebrities follow, and they're all launching culture coins or digital sort of culture coins in the future. And one of the interesting takes that I saw was that the Trump meme coin is like having a digital MAGA hat, like the equivalent of wearing a MAGA hat, but online. And I thought that was an interesting way to frame it as a collectible over it being a currency. And so, in that sense, I'm not super worried about people just collecting memorabilia for organizations they're fans of. But, I think that we're in new uncharted territory, and it's anyone's guess what's going to occur over the next 4 years as the Trump presidency continues on.
Yeah, I mean, I think, maybe the Trump trading cards could be a good apples to apples there for the digital MAGA hat. And then, now that he's launched Trump a meme coin and is concurrently working with his family to build a DeFi platform that appears to be somewhat of an Aave fork, does seem like the next logical step would be take Melania and Trump and have it trade on that platform. So now you're not only making money on the casino, but you're also making money on the chips traded in the casino, which is a very interesting and probably lucrative venture for President Trump and his family, though I, again, do question what that means for the ethics of it all. And maybe those questions will be answered this year. But Kevin, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. These are all very interesting conversations. And if you think about America as a DAO, certainly those of us who are in it, whether we want to be or not, it is rather important to, I think, do your part and consider protecting the DAO. And I think you highlight all of that in the book. And I think it is really interesting to think about some of those best concepts from before they were DAOs, they were co-ops or democracies, and highlighting it all in How to DAO, Mastering the Future of Internet Coordination. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate the time.
Zach, I think you're doing great work in the space, not only covering the space, but also practicing it yourself with what you're doing at Coinage. So hope to chat with you in a few months, in a year, and we'll see in the rearview mirror what has happened over the last couple of years. And I think it's a really exciting time to be in the frontier. So thanks for everything you do. The book is How to DAO, howtodao.xyz if you want to pick up a copy. And I'll see you all on the internet. Peace.
Yeah, no, that means a lot, man. I appreciate that. Hope to see you at a ETH Denver when we're out there in Colorado, where we are registered. But thank you again, Kevin Owocki. I appreciate the time. And of course, if you haven't yet, you can go to coinage.media and snag an NFT to co-own what we're doing here at Coinage as the first Web3 media outlet. That is Web3 in everything we try to do here. Snag one, register, and then open up a path to patronage dividends as we have some big, exciting news on that front to come next week. For Kevin, for myself, for everybody here at Coinage, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll chat again soon. Catch all the big headlines in Web3 at coinage.media. Thanks again.